Jean Jacques Henner was one of the most bizarre and iconoclastic painters of his time. Born in the northern French region of Alsace in 1829, he was known for his sensuous pictures of nymphs and naiads in vague landscape settings, and of ghostly, almost symbolist heads of young women. He was a lot more renowned during his own time than he is now, and won several awards and accolades from the French art establishment during his lifetime, including the Legion of Honor, although he pushed the envelope of taste with sensual scenery and voluptuous nudes. He was a classicist who worked to revive some of the techniques of Italian and Dutch masters of centuries past, including chiaroscuro, and a fringe contributor to the Impressionist movement, which most critics found deeply shocking and distasteful in its early years. I find this quote from Camille Paglia very relevant when looking at his paintings, which discusses the vague enveloping darkness that clouds his figures, called chiaroscuro. Botticelli's subtle atmospherics are so transparent they are easy to miss, but in Leonardo, a thundercloud of chiaroscuro is gathering. Leonardo, who melts the Apollonian line in shadow, is linked to Botticelli by the motif of an obsessively repeated face, used for both sexes. Leonardo's fumato, or smokiness, is a Chthonian leakage, a spreading miasma. Mona Lisa's ambiguous smile is a hieroglyph, symbolizing the link between Leonardo's sexual personae and their enshrouding atmosphere. A strange light which is their own stormy inner weather. But instead of that gently ambiguous and beckoning smile that Paglia describes from the Renaissance, we have here the full Chthonian terror of high or late decadent romanticism, mixed with that peculiar native feeling of the North, a natural shroudedness and Gothic atmosphere. These paintings are truly not Mediterranean or classical at heart in any way. Art historian Wilhelm Wöhringer, speaking about how France created the perfect apex of Gothic architecture and the Gothic system, compromising the pure Germanic northern feeling with some remnant of classical Romance harmony, wrote, quote, "The Germanic North, in its ponderousness, has always been incapable of formulating independently what it dimly conceived and desired. It was always Western Europe, dominated by Romance elements, which shattered the law of northern sluggishness, and which, in a great welling up of its energies, uttered the word which was waiting to be spoken by the Germanic North. It was in the heart of France, where Germanic and Romance elements interpenetrated most closely, that the act of liberation was performed, that the signal was given which ushered in the true Gothic. Romance enthusiasm, which can be worked up to the highest pitch of tension without losing its clarity, finds a clear formula for the vague northern will. In other words, it creates the Gothic system. For the Romance elements of the country, which made France capable of this energy of initiative and this energy of clear formulation, had on the other hand kept alive the connection with the antique tradition and its organically colored will to art." He also wrote, "In modern Europe, it is still perhaps only the case in France, where in its modern art a kind of synthesis between northern spirituality and southern sensuousness has been achieved." You can feel how Henner shows this amazingly in his works. There is an overall classical setting and realism, but it's covered in this Gothic miasma and creepiness, as well as intensified drama and heightened emotion, which I will explain as well soon. And of course, in a telling way, the painter came from France, which I think this segment explains the significance of very well. Notice how every face looks the same. What Paglia called an Apollonian feature. However, be that as it may, this exact face is striking in an archetypal or ghostly way. The same creepy features, not an ideal at all, but something that perfectly exemplifies the uncanny Gothic, like a gargoyle. It's definitely not that pure, perfectly symmetrical face of Botticelli's beautiful boy motif. When I observe these paintings, I can see that each one is staring deep into your eyes, facing you head-on with devilish lowered lids and an intense glare. If it weren't for this glare, which feels so strikingly alive, bringing a deep sense of presence and reality to the paintings, they would feel completely dead and ghost-like. These women look like they're actually looking at you. The frame dissolves, and you can just feel the energy and soulful connection of being seen by them in a supra-real sense. The style or technique looks almost impressionistic, but it isn't, because instead of making the scene feel less real, it somehow feels more real, as if it's not a painting, because there's no scene. There's no background, only the subject, escaping the frame and sitting in the room with you. As if the artist isn't even a painter at all, but an incanter of real spirits. Let me read another quote from Form in Gothic on the peculiarity of Germanic religious feeling. Quote, "On the one hand, we have a vague, impersonal agitation, a tremendous force of abstract energies, which take shape only occasionally, and then in a deceptive, enigmatic, irritating manner. The distinction between beauty of expression and power of expression may at once be transferred to the whole character of the stylistic phenomena of classical and Gothic art." Warringer talks about a spiritual vitality extending far beyond the senses, and that, bereft of all pure natural satisfaction, this pathos can only wear itself out in a convulsive, unnatural satisfaction. But this violent exhalation sweeps it into spheres of sensibility, in which it finally loses its feeling of inward discord, in which it finds emancipation from its restless, confused relation towards the image of the external world. Distressed by actuality, debarred from naturalness, it aspires to a world above the actual, above the sensuous. It uses this tumult of sensations to lift itself out of itself. It is only in intoxication that it experiences the thrill of eternity. It is this exalted hysteria which is above all else the distinguishing mark of the Gothic phenomenon. Warringer speaks about the religious frame of mind of the northern peoples and how they situate themselves almost in the middle of the deeply felt definitive dualism of the Orient, an acceptance of man's lack of understanding of God and his ultimate transcendental powers, and the Greek urge for knowledge and classical happy understanding and unity with the divine. Quote, "A final liberation must therefore still be considered possible. The consciousness of an uncompromising dualism must still be lacking. The opposites are not considered as irreconcilable, but only as not yet reconciled, and the difference between the expressionless, abstract line of Oriental man and the intensified expression of the abstract line of Gothic man is just the difference between a final definitive dualism, born of a most profound insight into the world, and a provisional dualism of a still undeveloped stage of knowledge. That is to say, the difference between the sublime quietism of old age and the exalted pathos of youth. The dualism of Gothic man is not superior to knowledge, as in Oriental man, but prior to knowledge. It consists partly of a vague presentiment, partly of a bitter experience of facts. His dualistic sufferings have not yet been transformed into reverence. He still strives against dualistic inevitableness and endeavors to overcome it by an unnatural enhancement of sensibility. The feeling of dualistic distraction, which is neither overcome by rational, sensuous knowledge in the classical sense, nor softened and enlightened by profound metaphysical insight as in the Oriental fashion, leaves him neither rest nor peace. He feels himself enslaved by higher powers, which he merely fears without worshipping. With his joyless fear of the world, he stands as a product of earthly unrest and metaphysical anxiety. And as rest and clear vision are denied him, his only resource is to increase his restlessness and confusion to the pitch where they bring him stupefaction and release. Quote, Lamprecht wrote, Germanic poetry knows no contemplative absorption into a peaceful condition. Its poetry dreams of no actionless idyll. Its attention is concentrated on stirring action and the flood tide of emotion. Our ancestors must have been specially influenced by the feeling of pathos. Otherwise, the fashioning of this poetry cannot be the faithful expression of their inner mood. What has already been betrayed by the character of Northern Ornament is thus confirmed. Where the enhanced pathetic note dominates, there is an inward dissonance to be overcome. All pathos is foreign to a healthy soul. The last quote from this section of Form in Gothic that I'm going to read is by Goethe. He says, Just as the sublime is so easily engendered by twilight and night, when shapes are easily confused, so by daylight, which divides and defines all things, it is dispelled, and thus by every developing image it will be undone. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please leave a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe.